If you can't even contribute a single miserable dollar to this household, you can pack your pathetic bags and get the hell out of my house." My mother's high-pitched screech shattered the fragile morning quiet of the kitchen, bouncing violently off the ceramic-tiled walls and vibrating straight through my teeth. She slammed her heavy ceramic coffee mug onto the granite countertop with enough brute force to send a dark, scalding wave of liquid sloshing over the edge, pooling around a stack of unopened mail. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice, her eyes narrowed into two venomous slits as she pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at my face. I stood perfectly still near the refrigerator, holding a half-empty carton of milk, my body entirely frozen as the sheer, breathtaking ingratitude of her words echoed through the room. Beside her sat my golden child older brother, Julian, who didn't even bother to look up from his brand-new iPad, a subtle, self-satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his lips as he aggressively chewed his breakfast. "I am sick and tired of playing landlord to an ungrateful, freeloading parasite who does nothing but occupy space and drain my resources," she continued to roar, her chest heaving beneath her silk bathrobe. "Your brother actually has a real corporate future, while you sit in your room staring at computer screens all day, pretending to work while I pay for the roof over your head." She genuinely believed every single word that was flying out of her mouth, completely blinded by her own monstrous ego and her deep-seated favoritism for her firstborn son. What she failed to realize, wrapped tightly in her blanket of supreme arrogance, was a financial reality so monumental it would have brought her entire world crashing down if she possessed the intellect to see it. For the past 24 months, my mother hadn't paid for a single square inch of the roof over her head, nor had she contributed a dime to the food resting in her pantry. When my father passed away 2 years ago, he left behind a mountain of hidden commercial debt, an unpayable primary mortgage, and a household account that was bleeding thousands of dollars a month. My mother had no corporate skills. Julian was a lazy, unemployed country club socialite who refused to work a standard job, and the family was on the absolute precipice of a humiliating public eviction. I was the one who quietly stepped into the financial shadows, utilizing my specialized remote career as a senior cloud infrastructure architect to silently absorb the entire family estate. I didn't do it because I loved her toxic outbursts, but out of a misplaced, desperate sense of familial duty and a desire to honor my late father's memory by keeping his home intact. I made over $240,000 a year working for a major international tech conglomerate, a fact I carefully hid from them by dressing in plain clothes and keeping my head down. Because my mother was completely illiterate when it came to digital banking and modern property management, I had quietly set up a master online portal under my own personal legal credentials. I had routed the primary mortgage, the high-speed fiber internet, the commercial water lines, the grid electricity, the trash collection, and even her automated premium grocery delivery straight to my corporate checking account. Every single month, nearly $7,000 was systematically, automatically drained from my hard-earned funds to maintain her luxurious, suburban lifestyle while she treated me like a domestic servant. She truly believed that my father's mythical, residual investments were magically paying for everything, a comfortable lie she told herself so she never had to acknowledge my immense value. "Do you hear me speaking to you? Or has that useless computer job completely rotted your brain?" she snarled, stepping into my personal space, the smell of her stale coffee and expensive perfume filling the air. "You have until the end of the week to show me a formal leasing agreement for your own place, or I am having the sheriff throw your belongings onto the curb." Julian finally looked up, offering a mocking chuckle as he adjusted his designer watch. "Just let her go, Mom. She's dragging down the property value just by standing in the kitchen." A sudden, white-hot wave of absolute calm washed over my chest, completely replacing the initial sting of her betrayal with an icy, unyielding clarity that made my breathing slow to a perfect rhythm. The invisible chains of familial guilt that had bound me to this toxic household for 24 agonizing months suddenly snapped, leaving behind the pure, clinical focus of an architect ready to demolish a faulty structure. "You don't need to wait until the end of the week, Mother," I said, my voice deadpan, chillingly quiet, carrying a strange, dangerous, still that made her blink in momentary confusion. I will ensure that my presence is completely removed from your sight before the sun comes up tomorrow morning. My mother laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that carried the supreme, untouchable confidence of a tyrant who believed she held all the leverage in the world. Good. Don't let the door hit your freeloading backside on the way out, and make sure you don't try to crawl back when you realize you can't survive in the real world without my charity. I set the milk carton down slowly on the counter, turned on my heel, and walked out of the kitchen, the sound of their arrogant, unified laughter echoing down the hallway behind me. I walked straight into my bedroom, locked the heavy oak door, and immediately pulled out my secure, encrypted smartphone, my fingers moving across the screen with a rapid, lethal precision. My first call was to Marcus, my brilliant, steadfast partner who had spent the last 8 months begging me to leave this parasitic environment and move into the beautiful downtown high-rise apartment we had quietly secured together. Marcus answered on the very first ring, his voice warm, deep, and instantly grounding after the chaotic storm I had just endured in the kitchen. "Hey, beautiful. Please tell me today is the day you finally let that house go," Marcus said softly, his tone carrying an immediate, protective undertone that made a tear finally slip down my cheek. "It's over, Marcus," I whispered, leaning my head against the locked door as a profound sense of relief began to bloom in my soul. She just officially ordered me to pack my things and get out by the end of the week. "I am moving tonight, and I need you to bring the cargo van to the back gate at precisely midnight while she and Julian are asleep." Marcus didn't hesitate for a single second. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations because he had witnessed the emotional scars my mother had inflicted upon me for years. "I'll be there at 11:30, sweetie. Your keys are already on the kitchen island of our new place, and the master closets are completely empty and waiting for you," Marcus said, his voice absolute and unyielding. "Let's pack your life up and never look back at that graveyard again." After hanging up with Marcus, I sat behind my dual-monitor workstation, logging into the primary financial administration portals that controlled the life support systems of my mother's estate. With a series of cold, calculated mouse clicks, I systematically began the digital execution of her household infrastructure, unfolding my operational revenge with a clinical detachment. I opened the primary mortgage portal, navigating to the automatic payment routing tab where my corporate checking account had been registered for 2 solid years. I clicked the delete button, watching the confirmation prompt flash on the screen before permanently removing my financial routing numbers from the property's primary ledger. Next came the municipal electricity grid, followed closely by the regional water utility network, the gas line infrastructure, and the high-speed fiber optic data pipeline. One by one, I deactivated the automatic payment authorizations, unlinking my credit profiles and changing the primary billing notification addresses from my secure corporate email to my mother's personal, unread inbox. I didn't cancel the utilities outright, as that would have triggered an immediate warning notification to the house. Instead, I simply left them entirely unbacked, allowing the automated system to default naturally. Under the state's current regulatory timeline, the utility companies would allow exactly 30 days of non-payment before their automated systems triggered a hard, remote termination of service. I also canceled the premium automated grocery delivery service, the weekly landscaping contract, the community pool maintenance subscription, and the private neighborhood security detail. By the time I closed my laptop at 5 o'clock that evening, over $7,000 in monthly operational subsidies had been permanently wiped clean from her estate. My mother and Julian had spent years treating me like a brainless cash cow while genuinely believing they were the ones funding the kingdom, and they were about to receive a historic lesson in basic mathematics. At precisely midnight, the massive suburban estate fell into a deep, heavy silence, the glowing security lights outside casting long, sharp shadows across the manicured lawn. I heard the distant, muffled sounds of my mother snoring from her master's suite down the hall, while Julian's room remained quiet, his expensive gaming computer finally turned off for the night. I unlocked my bedroom door, stepping out into the darkened hallway with a stack of flat-packed cardboard moving boxes I had hidden beneath my bed weeks ago. For the next 3 hours, The dead silence of the house was punctuated only by the sharp, rhythmic ripping of heavy-duty packing tape and the soft scraping of cardboard against the carpet. I packed only what belonged to me: my advanced technical workstation, my clothing, my personal legal documents, and the few precious childhood mementos my father had left me. I didn't touch a single piece of furniture, a single decoration, or a single appliance that belonged to the household, leaving the room looking like a sterile, abandoned hotel suite. Marcus arrived exactly on time, his silhouette appearing at the back glass doors of the patio like a guardian angel emerging from the midnight fog. Together, working in total, synchronized silence, we transferred my entire life into the back of the cargo van, our breaths fogging in the crisp, cool night air. As we secured the final latch of the van doors, I turned around to look at the massive, dark mansion one last time, the cold brick facade looking remarkably empty without my presence inside. "Are you ready, beautiful?" Marcus whispered, wrapping his strong arm around my shoulders and pressing a warm, supportive kiss against the side of my head. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied softly, stepping into the passenger seat and closing the door with a muted, satisfying click. We drove away into the midnight darkness, leaving the sleeping parasites behind to enjoy the final 30 days of their unearned, subsidized fantasy. The transition into our new downtown high-rise apartment was an absolute dream, a beautiful, sunlit sanctuary filled with clean lines, green plants, and an overwhelming aura of genuine peace. The cold silence of the newly rented apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt incredibly light, a blank canvas where the suffocating toxicity of my mother's voice could never reach me. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without a heavy knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, enjoying long, quiet mornings drinking coffee with Marcus while looking out over the city skyline. I threw myself into my cloud architecture projects with a renewed, ferocious energy, securing a massive corporate promotion and an additional 30% salary increase within my first 3 weeks. My personal bank accounts began to swell rapidly, the $7,000 I was no longer wasting on my ungrateful family remaining safely tucked away in high-yield investment portfolios. I completely blocked my mother's and Julian's primary phone numbers on my personal device, routing any potential communications to a secondary, silent digital voicemail box that I checked only once a week. For 29 days, the silent voicemail box remained entirely empty, my family apparently too proud and too wrapped up in their own arrogance to check on the child they had thrown out. My mother was likely bragging to her country club friends about how she had successfully purged her household of a freeloading parasite, completely unaware that the countdown clock on her survival was ticking down to the final seconds. The illusion finally, spectacularly fractured into a million jagged pieces on the morning of the 31st day, unfolding with a terrifying, poetic velocity. It was the first day of the new month, the exact date when all the automated utility corporate systems processed their mandatory past-due accounts and initiated hard cutoffs. I was sitting at my beautiful teak desk in my home office, collaborating on a global server migration project with my international team, when my secondary phone suddenly began to vibrate violently against the glass surface. The screen lit up with a frantic, blinding series of incoming notifications from the silent voicemail box, the caller ID indicating my mother's home landline number. I didn't answer it. I simply leaned back in my ergonomic chair, picking up a cup of green tea and watching the phone dance across the glass as it rang, disconnected, and immediately began ringing again. It rang 12 times in a row without a single pause, the sheer, frantic rhythm of the vibration broadcasting a state of absolute, unmitigated panic from the other side of the city. After the 13th call finally disconnected, I quietly accessed the digital audio logs of the voicemail box, clicking the playback button for the first message she had left. Lana, if you are screening your calls, you need to pick up this phone right this instant. My mother's voice erupted through the speaker, her high-pitched screech completely gone, replaced by a ragged, breathless gasp. The high-speed internet and the television just cut off in the middle of your brother's corporate interview, and the provider is claiming our account is 2 months past due. They're saying the primary billing name isn't even registered to this house, and they want $800 to restore the connection. Call them right now and fix this glitch. I let out a soft, quiet laugh, clicking the playback button for the second voicemail, which had been recorded exactly 7 minutes after the first one. Lana, something catastrophic is happening. The power just went completely dark across the entire house. The refrigerators are off, the security alarms are blaring, and the neighborhood association says the main grid link has been disconnected for non-payment. Your brother went down to the basement to check the main breaker panels, but there's a heavy legal padlock on the external meter box with a notice from the electricity company. They're demanding thousands of dollars in back payments, Lana. Where is your father's residual investment account information? Why aren't the banks processing the automated transfers? The third voicemail was the absolute crown jewel of the collection, recorded just 5 minutes later, my mother's tone completely collapsing into a hysterical, sobbing wail that carried no remaining shred of her usual tyranny. Lana, please. The water just stopped running. I was in the middle of a shower and the pipes just went completely dry. There are legal eviction warning notices taped to our front glass doors from the primary mortgage bank. They are saying the house is entering immediate foreclosure because the last 24 months of equity payments were routed through a private corporate checking account that has been completely unlinked. Julian is having a complete panic attack, the house is freezing, and we don't have a single dollar of cash to pay these people. Where are you? You need to come home and handle this right now. I stood up from my desk, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, looking out at the distant, sprawling suburbs where my mother's dark, frozen mansion was currently suffocating in reality. I took my personal phone, unblocked her number for exactly 60 seconds, and dialed her landline back, knowing she would answer before the first ring could even finish. Lana. Oh, thank God, you're alive, she screamed into the receiver, her voice shaking violently with a profound, breathless terror. You need to wire $10,000 to the utility portals immediately. The house is completely dead, and the bank is threatening to lock us out by Friday. Why didn't you maintain the automated accounts? What did you do to your father's residual investments? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea, letting the silence hang over the line for 5 long seconds, allowing the cold weight of her own karma to press into her chest. There were never any residual investments, Mother, I said, my voice carrying an absolute, crushing stillness that caused her frantic breathing to instantly freeze on the other end. My father died completely bankrupt, leaving behind a mountain of debt that would have put you on the street 2 years ago. I was the one who paid every single mortgage payment, every electricity bill, every drop of water, and every piece of food that entered your body for 24 months. I was the cloud architect whose job you mocked, the freeloading parasite who quietly spent over $150,000 of her own hard-earned money to keep your fragile ego alive. A horrific, dead silence descended over the phone line, so profound and absolute that I could hear the faint, desperate ticking of her battery-operated wall clock in the background of her frozen kitchen. No, that's a lie, she whispered, her voice cracking into a thin, fragile thread of pure cognitive dissonance. You're just a child. Your brother is the one with the future. You couldn't own this estate. I don't just own the estate assets, Mother. My corporate holding company officially purchased your primary mortgage debt from the bank 3 weeks ago, I added smoothly, letting the final legal guillotine drop. You told me to pack my pathetic bags and get the hell out of your house, screaming that I needed to pay my own bills and stop draining your resources. I simply followed your maternal instructions to the letter. I packed my life, moved into a gorgeous downtown penthouse with Marcus, and permanently severed my financial accounts from your existence. Lana, please, we are your family, your own flesh and blood, she sobbed openly, her tone changing from her historical, booming arrogance to a sniveling, desperate crawl. Julian doesn't know how to handle this. We have nowhere to go. You can't leave your own mother in a dark, freezing house without water. You have until the end of the week to pack your personal belongings and vacate my property, Mother, I replied, using the exact, clinical phrases she had hurled at me 30 days prior. Because at precisely 9 a.m. on Friday morning, my corporate legal team and the county sheriff will be arriving to execute a formal lockout and place the foreclosure seals on the front doors. Lana. No. Please. Have mercy, she shrieked, her voice rising to a frantic, hysterical pitch that echoed weakly through the speaker of my phone. Goodbye, Eleanor, I said softly, before sliding the digital bar to end the call, permanently severing the connection and blocking her numbers for the rest of eternity. I took a deep, clear breath of the clean penthouse air, turning around to see Marcus standing at the kitchen island, holding a fresh plate of breakfast pastries with a brilliant, triumphant smile. The frantic ringtone of the secondary phone began to buzz against the desk once more, but I didn't even look at it as I walked over, picked up the device, and completely powered it down, dropping it into the depths of a desk drawer. The final execution of her karma was absolute, a public and historic dismantling of a toxic dynasty that left them completely, hopelessly exposed to the consequences of their own cruelty. On Friday morning, my legal representatives and the county enforcement officers arrived at the suburban mansion, systematically executing the formal eviction protocol in front of the entire Whispering neighborhood. My mother and Julian were forced to pack their remaining luxury items into cheap plastic laundry baskets, stepping out onto the concrete driveway of a completely dark, frozen house that had been stripped of its life support systems. Julian's country club memberships were instantly canceled for non-payment, and my mother was forced to downsize into a tiny, state-subsidized studio apartment on the neglected edge of the city, funded entirely by a meager government welfare check. They were left with absolutely nothing but a mountain of unpayable private debt, a completely shattered reputation, and the permanent, crushing realization that their own ungrateful arrogance had destroyed their only provider. I stood on the expansive, sunlit balcony of my penthouse that evening, wrapping my hands around a warm mug of cocoa as the city lights slowly began to twinkle beneath a brilliant twilight sky. The world looked incredibly vast, beautiful, and filled with a limitless potential that was completely free from the suffocating shadows of my childhood trauma. Marcus walked out onto the balcony, wrapping his arms tightly around my waist from behind and resting his chin against my shoulder as we watched the distant transit lines move with perfect precision. I had honored my own true worth not by allowing myself to be permanently minimized by a parasitic family, but by having the silent, enduring resilience to let them drown in the reality of their own entitlement. I turned around in his embrace, offering my partner a warm, peaceful smile as we stepped back inside our beautiful sanctuary, ready to lead our lives into a flawless, brilliant, and entirely independent tomorrow.